Keir Starmer will be consigned to the bin of history if he fails to raise defense spending, a former head of the British Army has said. Gen Lord Richard Dannett believes the forthcoming Strategic Defense Review risks being hollow and a failure unless the Prime Minister and his Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, find ways of increasing the defense budget. Starmer has so far resisted pressure to boost defense spending to 3% of GDP, with some insiders saying he is determined to stick to Labour's election manifesto that said it would commit to set out a pathway to spend 2.5% on defense. Defense chiefs want him to go further, but there are fears that a more immediate increase for the armed forces would take money away from other departments in need of a boost. Speaking to The Week in Westminster on BBC Radio 4, Dannett said, "Unless Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves can look at themselves in the mirror and look at their priorities and say, yes, health, education, roads, infrastructure are important, but actually defense and the security of this nation are more important, and find ways of producing more money well beyond 2.5% towards 3 or 3.5% for starters on our defense budget, then this strategic defense review is going to be hollow. It's going to be a failure. And frankly, it'll consign Keir Starmer to the bin of history." The U.S. President, Donald Trump, a long-standing critic of the amount fellow NATO countries spend on defense, has suggested members of the Transatlantic Alliance should spend 5% of GDP on their militaries. That prompted John Healey, the UK Defense Secretary, to acknowledge the UK and European allies must do more of the heavy lifting by increasing their defense spending so the US would not be tempted to leave the NATO alliance altogether. But he did not say when and by how much. Dannett, a crossbench peer who was head of the Army from 2006 to 2009, was also asked about Starmer's suggestion that British soldiers could be deployed to Ukraine as peacekeepers in the event of a deal to end the war. Reflecting on how many soldiers would be needed, he told the program, "It would probably require about 100,000 people. The UK would have to supply quite a proportion of that, and we really couldn't do it. Our military is so run down at the present moment, numerically and as far as capability and equipment is concerned, it would potentially be quite embarrassing." G7 delegates gathered in Munich on Friday for a major global security conference, amid concerns that officials in Moscow and Washington could be negotiating the future of European security over the heads of its leaders. Britain has so far sought to manage a delicate balance between supporting Ukraine against Russia's invasion and keeping Trump on side, who has said he agreed with Putin to start negotiations. The Foreign Secretary David Lammy on Friday sat down for talks with the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, who said, "We have a lot in common, and the special relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States will remain very strong." In a call with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Starmer said Britain was committed to Ukraine being on an irreversible path to joining NATO and was unequivocal that there could be no talks about Ukraine without Ukraine.